Why do the kindest people often suffer the most? It's strange, isn't it? The gentle ones, the givers, the hearts that forgive too easily, they are the ones who end up bleeding in silence. We live in a world that rewards sharp elbows and louder voices. From an early age, we're told that to survive, we must be ruthless, that kindness makes you weak, that softness is a liability, that the world belongs to those who strike first. But what if that's the biggest lie you've ever believed? What if kindness was never weakness at all? What if it was Machiavelli's darkest secret? A weapon so subtle, so powerful, that only a few ever learn how to wield it. Because true kindness, conscious kindness, is not submission. It's not the fragile smile of someone afraid to be disliked. It is the calm, unshakable power of someone who knows exactly when to yield and when to stand unmovable. Machiavelli understood something most people never will, that the art of power isn't about cruelty. It's about control of one's impulses, emotions, and image. He knew that fear commands obedience, but kindness, when used with awareness, commands loyalty. So today, I'm going to show you the truth behind that secret. Why the world has misunderstood Machiavelli for centuries, and why the very trait you've been taught to suppress your kindness might be the most strategic form of power you possess. Take a breath, clear your thoughts, and stay with me until the end of this video. Because once you understand this, you'll never look at kindness or power the same way again. Before we dive in, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, so you'll be the first to awaken with every new piece of truth we uncover together. They called him the devil of politics, the man who taught kings to lie, betray, and manipulate their way to power. For centuries, Niccolò Machiavelli's name has been drenched in the scent of cruelty, a synonym for deception, a curse whispered in the corridors of morality. But that is not who he was. That is who we made him. When Machiavelli wrote The Prince in 1513, he wasn't building a handbook for monsters. He was holding up a mirror, forcing humanity to stare into its own reflection. He didn't invent deceit or ambition. He simply described them in the raw, uncomfortable way most people don't dare to admit exists. He understood something chilling about the human condition, that power is not found in morality or ideals, but in the ability to see things as they truly are, without illusion. He knew that fear moves crowds, but compassion, when timed and measured, can move empires. That's the part the world refused to understand. Because we crave simplicity, we want heroes and villains. But Machiavelli gave us something far more disturbing, a world where good and evil are not opposites, they are tools. And within that dark insight lies his secret. He knew that the strongest leaders were not those who crushed others beneath their heel, but those who mastered themselves first, who could control their emotions, play both lion and fox, and choose kindness not from weakness, but from strength. To Machiavelli, kindness was not a virtue, it was a strategy. It was the soft edge of power, the velvet glove that hides the steel of intention. He saw what few dared to see, that to influence others, you must first understand them. And to understand them, you must step into their world with empathy. Empathy, not as surrender, but as leverage. In modern psychology, this concept is called strategic empathy. It's the highest form of intelligence, the ability to feel another's emotions without drowning in them, to read motives without losing your own center. Look around you. In every workplace, every political movement, every social sphere, you'll find two kinds of power. The loud one, built on fear, force, domination. And the quiet one, the kind that disarms a room with presence alone. You can sense it in the leader who listens more than he speaks, who doesn't need to raise his voice to command attention, who earns respect without demanding it. That's Machiavellian kindness, not passive, not submissive, but deliberate, measured, precise. When he wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both," the world clung to the word feared and ignored the last three, if you cannot be both. Because to be both To balance fear and love, power and empathy, is the highest art of leadership. Few ever reach it, because it demands emotional control of a kind most people never master. Fear manipulates, kindness transforms. Fear demands compliance, kindness inspires loyalty. One is temporary, the other eternal. Machiavelli's warning wasn't to abandon kindness, but to refine it, to free it from naivety, to make it conscious. Because unconscious kindness destroys. It gives until it's empty. It forgives until it's forgotten. But conscious kindness, kindness with awareness, that is power. And that's what this world needs more than ever. Not softer hearts, but stronger ones. Hearts that can feel deeply and still stand firmly. Leaders who understand that empathy is not submission. It's the highest form of influence. Think about your own life, at work, in love. Among friends, have you mistaken kindness for weakness? Or have you ever been punished for being good? And if so, how did it change you? Tell me your story in the comments below. Because every person who learns to wield kindness consciously becomes a quiet force of transformation. The kind of person the world desperately needs, but rarely understands. And in the next part, we'll go even deeper into Machiavelli's psychology of power, and how thinkers like Carl Jung revealed that the shadow of kindness may be the very place where your true strength is hiding. Machiavelli once wrote, "A prince should be both a lion and a fox." For centuries, readers have been obsessed over the lion's strength, dominance, aggression, and ignored the fox, the symbol of subtlety and awareness. But what if the real wisdom wasn't in either animal alone? What if it lived in the tension between them? That space between strength and empathy, between dominance and understanding, that is where kindness becomes power. The lion acts, the fox perceives, but kindness chooses. It decides when to roar, when to listen, when to wait. Asterisk, and in that act of conscious choice, a new kind of power is born. Not the power that conquers others, but the power that conquers oneself. Carl Jung once said, "The shadow of power isn't evil, it's unconscious goodness." He meant that what we repress, what we hide behind masks of morality, often contains our greatest strength. The part of you that wants to please everyone, that's afraid to disappoint, that can't bear to say no, that's not your virtue. That's your shadow pretending to be kind. True kindness begins when you stop being afraid of your own power. Because fear-based kindness is just disguised submission. It bends to be accepted. It gives one to be liked. It smiles to survive. But conscious kindness, that's when compassion meets self-respect. It's when you know your boundaries and still choose softness, not because you must, but because you can. Look around modern America, in offices, on social media, even in our relationships, we've confused kindness with compliance. We've become afraid to offend, allergic to conflict, addicted to appearing good rather than being real. And the result? We're polite on the outside, but internally burnt out, resentful, unseen. Machiavelli saw this centuries before psychology had a name for it. He understood that human beings don't follow truth, they follow strength. And strength, paradoxically, isn't brutality. It's clarity, it's composure under fire. It's the calmness that unnerves those who try to manipulate you. When someone can't provoke you, they can't control you. That's what Machiavelli called virtue, the disciplined power of self-command. In Jungian terms, that's integration, the union of the shadow with the self. The moment you stop fighting your darker impulses and start transforming them into awareness, you stop reacting from fear and begin acting from choice. Your kindness becomes sharper, wiser, even strategic. Psychologists today call this emotional regulation, the ability to hold your feelings without letting them hold you. Daniel Goleman calls it the foundation of emotional intelligence. And in leadership studies, it's considered the rarest form of authority, the kind that doesn't dominate the room, but centers it. Because power, at its highest form, isn't about control over others. It's the stillness of someone who no longer needs to prove anything. You've seen it. The calm leader who says little but changes everything. The teacher whose silence commands more respect than another's shouting. The person who listens deeply, not to respond, but to understand. They embody what Machiavelli hinted at, but never said outright, that kindness is the invisible architecture of influence. But here's the paradox. To reach that kind of mastery, you must first confront the part of yourself that fears being powerful. That's your shadow, the unconscious side Jung spoke of. It's not evil, it's your repressed capacity for strength. You can't be kind if you're afraid of your own teeth. Real compassion isn't fragile, it's fierce. It's the fire that warms, not the one that burns. It's the hand that reaches out after knowing how easily it could destroy. That is conscious kindness, the moment when empathy is no longer a reaction but a command. We live in a time when everyone wants to appear kind, but few are willing to cultivate the discipline behind it. Because this form of kindness isn't pleasant, it's painful. It demands self-awareness, confrontation, and control. It means saying no without guilt, forgiving without forgetting, and caring without being consumed. That's not a weakness, that's warriorship. The spiritual kind, the kind that fights for balance inside the soul. And maybe that's what Machiavelli tried to teach the rulers of his age, that the greatest empire you'll ever govern is the one within your own mind. So ask yourself, is your kindness conscious or is it conditioned? Do you choose it or does it choose you? Because until you answer that, your power will always belong to someone else. Share your thoughts below. Tell me the moment you realized your kindness had been mistaken for weakness, and what changed when you finally stopped apologizing for your strength. I read every comment, because these are not just stories, they are awakenings. In the next part, we'll bring these ideas to the real world, to workplaces, relationships, and social power, to see how conscious kindness moves quietly through modern life, turning what once looked like weakness into the ultimate form of influence. In modern America, the battlefield of power isn't fought with swords anymore. It's fought with tone, timing, and presence. In boardrooms, classrooms, and even on social media, you can feel the invisible current of who holds the energy in the room. It's not always the one who speaks the loudest. It's often the one who doesn't need to speak at all. We've been conditioned to believe that dominance equals confidence, that the loud leader is the effective one, that the first to speak must be the one who knows the most. But if you've ever watched a truly powerful leader at work, you'll notice something different. They create gravity. When they enter a space, conversations subtly slow down. People begin to measure their words. The energy shifts not because of intimidation, but because of presence. That's conscious kindness in motion. The calm, deliberate awareness that radiates control without saying a word. You can feel it in someone who truly listens, not waiting to respond, not rushing to prove, but holding silence as if it were an art form. Contrast that with the people pleaser. They rush to fill the silence. They nod too quickly. They over-explain, apologize, and shrink themselves into approval. They confuse kindness with safety. They think being agreeable keeps the peace, but in truth, it only feeds chaos. Because when you fear disappointing others, you become a mirror for their expectations, not a reflection of your truth. Psychologists call this fawning a trauma response, where you appease to survive. And it's destroying millions of minds in the modern workplace. People burn out not because they work too much, but because they give too much of themselves to things that don't deserve them. They confuse being useful with being valuable. On the other side is the conscious leader. They understand the psychology of silence. They know that restraint, not reaction, is the highest form of strength. When others panic, they observe. When others argue, they breathe. They act only when the move has meaning. This kind of leadership is rooted in what Daniel Goleman, author of Emotional Intelligence, called self-regulation, the capacity to choose your state instead of being ruled by it. He wrote, "Self-regulation is the highest form of power, And in every successful leader, from corporate CEOs to spiritual mentors, you can see this truth at work. A conscious leader doesn't use kindness to be liked. They use it to guide, to ground, to disarm. Because in a chaotic environment, calm is the loudest voice in the room. Think of the best managers, mentors, or visionaries you've known. They didn't win people with charm. They won them with clarity. Their kindness didn't ask for permission. It offered direction. It didn't chase approval. It inspired trust. That's why, in today's hyper-reactive culture, those who master emotional stillness are terrifying to others. Because they can't be manipulated. They don't take the bait. They see through flattery, provocation, and guilt-tripping, not with cynicism, but with awareness. Their kindness has edges. Now imagine applying this in your own life. At work, when someone tries to undermine you, instead of defending yourself instantly, pause, breathe, observe. When you choose silence over explanation, you shift from defense to dominance. The manipulator loses footing. They expect emotion. You offer awareness. And in that stillness, your power multiplies. In relationships, the same truth applies. Conscious kindness means loving without losing yourself. It means saying no with compassion, because a yes that costs your peace is never kindness, it's self-betrayal. It means you can be gentle and unyielding at once. And when you master that balance, you become the rarest kind of person in the world, the one who can heal others without absorbing their pain. Society may call you cold. Weak people often mistake boundaries for arrogance. But in time they learn, the calm one, the quiet one, the kind one who never reacts too soon, that's the one who truly holds the room. You don't have to dominate to be powerful. You just have to stop being emotionally predictable. That's the heart of Machiavelli's dark secret. When kindness is guided by awareness, it's no longer a reaction, it's a weapon. Not to harm others, but to protect your peace, your clarity, your center. So ask yourself, where in your life are you giving your energy away to people who mistake your kindness for permission? Where could your silence speak louder than your defense? Because the moment you start guarding your energy, you stop bleeding power into every conversation that doesn't deserve it. And when that happens, everything changes. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated because you were kind? Have you ever learned to turn your calm into strength? Share your story in the comments below. Your words might awaken someone else who's still fighting the battle you've already survived. In the next part, we'll take this further into the internal battlefield, where kindness becomes not just a strategy, but a transformation. Where you stop using kindness to survive and begin using it to evolve. There comes a moment in every life when power loses its meaning. When you've fought enough battles, won enough arguments, and realized that victory without peace feels hollow. That is the moment when Machiavelli's lesson shifts from the political to the personal, when the game of control turns inward. Because the hardest person to master is yourself, and the most dangerous enemy isn't outside you, it lives quietly within. Carl Jung called it the shadow. The unseen side of your nature that carries all you've rejected. Your anger, your envy, your pride, your hidden hunger for recognition. You've buried it beneath politeness, under moral masks and smiles. And yet, it leaks out in exhaustion, in resentment, in the quiet ache of a person who has forgotten how to be whole. For years, you've been taught to suppress your darker impulses. Be nice, stay humble, don't rock the boat. But what no one told you is that everything you repress becomes stronger. The parts of you that you fear, if unacknowledged, become tyrants in the dark. They rule your emotions. They twist your kindness into obligation. They turn your compassion into self-erasure. That's why Jung said, you do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Because true transformation isn't about becoming good. It's about becoming real. When you face the shadow without flinching, you begin to see that your so-called flaws were never enemies. Your anger carries your sense of justice. Your envy hides your buried potential. Your pride protects your dignity. Each of these traits, when integrated, transforms into wisdom. And here is the secret Machiavelli and Jung would agree on. Real power doesn't come from suppressing your instincts, it comes from mastering them. When you meet your shadow, you stop pretending to be harmless. You stop apologizing for having boundaries. You stop seeking validation from those who feed on your doubt. That's when your kindness changes texture. It stops being reaction, it becomes radiance. It's no longer a tool to please, but a reflection of inner alignment. Think of the people who carry this energy. They don't try to be kind, they simply are. Because their kindness doesn't come from guilt. It comes from clarity. They've walked through their own fire and made peace with what they found there. They've forgiven their past selves without forgetting their lessons. And that gives them a calmness that others mistake for mystery. In a world addicted to pretending, authenticity feels like rebellion. But conscious kindness isn't loud. It doesn't need to announce itself. It's felt in presence, the tone of your voice, the way you listen without judgment, the way you refuse to be provoked by noise. It's the quiet knowing that nothing anyone does can shake who you are. This is not spiritual fluff, it's psychological liberation. Because once you know your shadow, no one can use it against you. The manipulator loses their power when you no longer fear your anger. The critic loses their grip when you no longer crave approval. The world stops controlling you when you stop needing it to understand you. That is the awakening Machiavelli hinted at, the moment when the ruler within replaces the fear of the crowd. You become sovereign of your own psyche. Your decisions stop coming from defense and start coming from depth. And in that sovereignty, kindness becomes divine. Not the kind that bends, but the kind that heals. Not the kind that submits, but the kind that transforms. Because when you've met your darkness and survived it, your compassion gains weight. You no longer empathize out of fear. You empathize out of understanding. And that understanding is power. You realize that power was never about dominance at all. It was always about consciousness. The ability to hold strength and softness in the same breath, to look at chaos and remain still. So pause for a moment, close your eyes. Ask yourself, who would you be if your kindness wasn't driven by fear? If it came from choice, not conditioning? From awareness, not apology? That version of you exists already. It's waiting in the silence between your reactions, in the breath before your next response. And when you find it, you'll understand that the real revolution was never out there. It was always inside. Now tell me, what part of yourself have you recently reclaimed? What shadow have you faced and turned into light? Share your story in the comments. Because someone out there needs to hear your awakening to remember that theirs is possible too. In the next final part, we'll close this journey where it began, with the paradox of kindness itself. You'll all see why the power you've been chasing has always been hiding in the gentlest part of you. Power is not in domination. It's in control of your nature, your impulses, your silence. We began this journey with a question: why do the kindest people often suffer the most? Now you know the answer. They suffer not because they are weak, but because they've forgotten that kindness was never meant to be passive. It was meant to be powerful. The world doesn't need more ruthless men. It needs men and women who can be kind and still stand their ground. Who can hold fire in their hearts and peace on their faces. Who can look at cruelty and choose not to mirror it. That is conscious kindness, the most underestimated force on earth. It doesn't conquer with fear or manipulation. It conquers by presence. It's the power that stops wars before they start, that heals without demanding recognition, that transforms without needing to dominate. Machiavelli understood that power without wisdom destroys itself. He saw rulers who ruled through fear fall to their own paranoia. He knew that real strength, sustainable strength, comes from self-mastery, not spectacle. And in that hidden truth lies his darkest secret, that kindness, when fully aware, is not submission. It's sovereignty. Imagine a world where kindness is not currency, but command. where being gentle no longer means being naive, where empathy walks beside discipline and compassion holds hands with courage. That world begins with you. When you learn to pause before reacting, to listen without absorbing, to give without losing yourself, you become something rare. You become untouchable. Because no one can manipulate a person who acts from awareness instead of approval. And that's where freedom lives. Not in the absence of pain, but in the ability to choose your response to it. Not in controlling others, but in no longer being controlled by what they think of you. This is what both Jung and Machiavelli were pointing toward, from 2 different centuries, 2 different worlds, the evolution of human power. From domination to consciousness, from control of others to mastery of self, from fear to kindness. The day you realize that your kindness is not a weakness, but your most refined weapon, the world around you begins to bend. Not because you force it to, but because your presence commands it to. That is the power of conscious kindness. So take this with you. Let your silence speak when words would only waste energy. Let your compassion be precise, not endless. Let your strength be felt, not proven. And when the world tries to test your limits, remember, you can be kind and unbreakable at the same time. Because when your kindness is conscious, it becomes unstoppable. If this message resonated with you, if something inside you stirred, or you recognized a truth you've long ignored, don't let it fade. Take a deep breath and promise yourself this. You will never again apologize for being both gentle and strong. Now, before you leave, like this video, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you'll be the first to receive the next video. Each one crafted to awaken, to challenge, to heal. And please, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what part of this journey struck you the most. Was it the moment you saw your shadow? The realization that kindness is a strategy? Or the quiet truth that power lives inside peace? I read every word, because every comment here is not just feedback, it's a connection. It's a reminder that somewhere out there, another soul is waking up beside yours.